Welcome back to 8 Cubes. I'm KM Best. He's not Lambie series. I know they look a lot alike. It's very easy to confuse the two. Both Lambie and Binks look very similar. People say that all the time. That is, of course, Binks_plays. And he is one of my favorite people in the Marvel Snap scene. He's here to guest host on 8 Cubes. And we're going to start off talking about Peni Parker, who looks like the most goated Wiccan card of all time. 2-drop that puts a 3-drop in your hand. The 3-drop is basically a Hulkbuster that gives the ability to move. Penny, when she gets merged with, gives you extra energy. Just a bunch of stuff that this card wants you to be doing, that Wiccan decks want to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the card's just very strong. It's got a lot of Kate Bishop vibes. I think that when I saw Kate Bishop like coming out and people weren't really talking about her, they were talking about her as just like a devil dinosaur card. I was like, what are you all talking about, man? Like, it's a 2/3, it's a on rate 2/3 that adds 2 good 1-cost cards to your hand that can fill in curves. It's crazy. And this kind of gives those vibes. Obviously, having a 3-drop is not nearly as strong. And I do think that it's kind of interesting to think about how the card is a 1-cost more Hulkbuster, but it gives a move.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes it better than Hulkbuster. I think 1 energy is a lot. But I mean, being able to play it immediately and having it be a free card that gets added to your hand as opposed to needing a deck slot. Like, I think if the 3/3 that merged and moved, I'm not sure if that would see play or much play outside of maybe like Deadpool stuff. I'm just not positive how much better that is than Hulkbuster, costing a whole extra energy. But the thing is that you're getting this all in one package. You're getting a 2/3 that you could just play out on the board. 3 power is pretty good to you know, have some sizable push onto a board. You're getting an interesting and unique card that can move you into different situations. It could be good with locations. It can help you find you know, different ways to get places that your opponent won't expect. I think it's a full package is insane. And like you said, man, the Wiccan, like having Maria Hill give you a 2-drop and having this give you a 3-drop, and then you just everything's kind of taken care of. I feel like this is going to slot into almost every Wiccan deck and be a monster.
Yeah, like you mentioned that, like, you know, the 2/3 making the 1-drops is better because they can weave into your curve better. That's absolutely true. But there is one deck where that isn't true, and that's Wiccan. You need that 3. You need the 2, and then you need the 3. And it's like, this is a card that is almost tailor-made for that role. Like, I've never seen a card that I've been more excited to play. And then there's also, like, the additional merge synergy. I'm not going to be out here playing, like, Agony. Probably not going to be out here playing Agony in my Wiccan deck. But, like, there's a world where you're playing, like, Agony, Hulkbuster, Penny, Wiccan type thing. Like, you could try it. And I think the fact that Penny is also this, like, hey, you know, it's going to get pretty big, and it's going to get the extra energy. So, like, you know, let's say you merge, you can play a 5-drop if you don't have your Wiccan. You can still have a little bit of that energy cheat in the game that you're playing, even when you're not curving directly into Wiccan. I think it's an interesting card. I really do. And I think it's probably the card that I'm the most excited for this season. I don't think it's probably the best card this season, but it's the one that, because of what it does, fits so cleanly in like the type of mid-range pile decks that I just love to play, that it's like, this is a big good thing for what that deck is doing. You've actually been playing a lot of like Devil Dinosaur Wiccan stuff recently, right? This is a card that puts stuff in your hand and goes in a Wiccan deck. It's going in that deck, right?
Oh yeah, it's gonna go right into that deck, man. It's gonna be great. Yeah, it's just, you know, like you said, like the individual parts of this are not that exciting, but like the overall package is really cool. Like being able to do stuff and having decisions is what makes Marvel Snap a beautiful game. And I feel like deciding, you know, am I going to attach this to Peni Parker to guarantee the 1 energy, or maybe I have a choice to like put this on a different card and move things around. Like, I feel like it adds a good wrinkle to the game that's really cool. And then at the very least, yeah, if you're using it to just add cards to your hand, I mean, it's just great. It's a 2/3 that replaces itself, that could potentially get you 1 energy later and makes you not use those cards in your hand to keep boosting your Devil Dinosaur. I think that this card is going to be really fun, and I'm so excited to play with it.
It's definitely my favorite card of the season, just because of like all the weird hooks it has. I doubt that is enough to like make like Agony Hulkbuster a package with Penny. I think she's much more self-contained, but man, is she exciting. The future potential with her, other merge cards even, like there's some cool stuff that could happen here with this card. Right now, I think she's just, the world's greatest Wiccan card. But that's a really good thing to be. Like, it's like she's just that. Like, just amazing there. I normally don't talk about the card 2 weeks out on an episode like this, but I think it's important to talk about Doom 2099 in the context of the other topics on this episode, like Luna Snow, like Galacta, like Peni Parker. And the context here is I have some significant worries that when Doom 2099 comes out, he will make a lot of the current mid-range meta irrelevant. I have some worries about that. I'm not saying he's necessarily going to do that, but he is a card with the power potential to just be like, hey, Doom 2099, Sandman, Big Doom. And that's just gonna be better than like your Anti-Venom whatever, your Wiccan whatever. It's probably just gonna be better than that. Doom 2099 is a 417. And that's not counting the Doom that you play, which then becomes, I believe, 24 power instead of 15. Like, this is a card that has a lot of power, a ton of power attached to it. And I think it's worth talking about this card and how we think it's going to land, because I get a lot of people asking me, like, hey, should I buy Wiccan? Should I buy Galacta? Should I buy Anti-Venom? All these cards that directly compete with this card. And I think it's probably the kind of thing that I'm a little bit more scared of because this card exists, because it's in the future, because I can see it being such an important part of the metagame. It makes answering those questions a lot harder.
Yeah, interesting. So, I mean, I think that's some pretty relevant concerns. I think that Doombot 2099, I think it's going to be a card that we're going to have to see actually come out, because like you said, when you get that 3-card curve of, Doom 2099, a good, powerful single 5-drop and Doom, it's going to be strong. Does that deck, is that deck able to work when you don't get Doom 99 on turn 4 and you don't get Doom on turn 6? That's the big question, right? And I think that we've seen this a lot of times where, we'll look ahead to a future card and we'll completely, like, there's been so many times the community and so many people have just completely missed on a card being way stronger than we expect or way weaker than we expect. I think it's about, what happens when we don't hit those perfect lines. And, I have gone back and played some Ramp. I love Ramp, and Ramp is kind of just not good anymore. It's just like, now that you can't do the Sandman lockdown stuff, just playing 1 card per turn, you just see your opponent play like 3 cards and push stats in every lane. And it's like, all right, well, I just can't really keep up here. And I don't know. In my opinion, you mentioned Sandman. I think that card sucks.
It does.
But like, I don't think it's gonna be good.
It's so ass. But like, that is exactly how you, like, when I look at this card, what I see is, holy crap, we get absolutely housed by like every deck playing US Agent good 4-drop. And so if you play Sandman, then they can't do that. Like, that's sort of where my head is at. It's like, not like Sandman is actually good, but it's just like, oh my god, we lose so hard to like any deck that is able to play US Agent and other threats. And by Sandmanning, we make that just way, way, way harder. Because like US Agent, I don't think there's going to be a card that is as good against a new card. Like, this is like as good against this as like Luke Cage is against US Agent. You know what I mean? Where it's just like, you get US Agented and it's going to flip not just a lane, but your entire understanding of the game. Like, you're going to have a like 4 or 5 power guys, and you're going to be like, I've got 20 power here. And then US Agent is going to play for actually -4 on all of them, and you're going to cry. Like,
Classic,
you could,
219.
Like, it's going to be nuts as far as that. And it's like that. It's like stopping that from being paired with anything good. Because I agree, Sandman sucks, but it actually probably just is worth it, because otherwise, I don't know how you stay in any turn 6 against like a bounce deck. Like, you're just like, oh, I'm dead every time. And I think at least US Agent gives you the opportunity to live, because like, this feels like a deck that's like, it'll play a little bit like almost like Hella, where it's like, can you beat these numbers? Go ahead and try to beat these numbers. And then like a bounce deck, or like move bounce specifically, with like a 32 power Human Torch, every lane's going to be full, so Dagger's going to be ginormous. Two jumps on a Dagger will probably win every lane. That's the kind of deck that could just be like, here's a 30 power guy and a US Agent. Get out.
Yeah, yeah, it's probably gonna be a bit telegraphed. Do you know what the annoying thing, and I know
Mm.
I'm looking forward to seeing this, is where that final Doombot lands at the end of turn 6 is gonna decide some games and
Yeah.
make people wanna rip their damn hair out, dude.
Oh my god.
Um,
Yes.
those things that happens at the end of the game are always so annoying because, like, there's so many coin flips in every game. Like, but that happened during the course of it, but when one happens at the very end and you know
Yes.
exactly, like, oh, it's a 1 in 3 that I lose, and then that 1 in 3 happens, and you're just like, there's not much worse feelings in Marvel Snap than that. Great call out with US Agent being just an absolute dumpster of this whole kind of deck plan. I don't know. I'm really interested in Doombot 2099. I think it could be good in I think it might make Spectrum okay. Like, Spectrum is like a decent backup plan to that because you're getting these 2 ongoing cards out that you can Spectrum, and maybe you
It
build
is
this into like some
true.
kind of Spectrum deck. I don't think that'll be as good as the Doom game plan, but maybe it's kind of like, and even thinking about, how do we counter US Agent? There's a card that's pretty darn good at it. It's called Luke Cage.
Probably play that anyway,
Maybe,
though.
yeah, maybe you're using some kind of like affliction early ongoing synergies. You have Luke Cage, and then if you don't draw the Doom, which is obviously your best power play, you have Spectrum, which can
Yeah.
affect it in different ways. I think that there will be counterplay to it. It's definitely a card that the meta is going to shift around. I don't know if I'm as scared about it as you, but you're better at the game than me, and I think that the more that you're talking about it, I definitely think that there's some really good things to be seen here. But it's a very compelling and interesting card. Any card that's making Doom and Spectrum in my mind wanted to be playable. That's exciting because those are cards that have kind of been slowly power crept over time, and it's nice to see them wanting to come back and want to utilize these cards that have been so relevant and important in Marvel Snap metas in the past.
I mean, that is the nice way to say it. The mean way to say it would be that they're charging you for the privilege. Like, oh, you want to play Spectrum? 6,000 tokens, buddy. You want to play Doctor Doom? 6,000 tokens, buddy. Pony up. The reason I bring this up is basically Galacta, who is kind of in a million decks right now and has very obviously like been a powerful card. But the more I play with her, the more I'm like, I'm not really sure she's the best way to be doing mid range. And that's not to say that I know for a fact that she's not. Just, I'm not really sure that she is. I think, it's entirely possible that she is, but she comes with some attendant cards that tend to go with her. And it's just like, maybe I'm not supposed to build around her as much as I have been. Maybe I'm just supposed to play her and that's it. And she's just like a card that goes in my deck and I'm just happy because she's big. That's totally viable to me in terms of an explanation. But this is a card that's especially hard for me to evaluate in the context of Doom 2099 because a lot of the Galacta decks I've played, the big thing they struggle with is anything that can go bigger than them with green power. And because they tend to be like, as much as +3 is a big number, it is a limited number. And so, like, if you're playing against, a dagger that's, for example, getting multiple +3s, or a human torch that is being multiplied, like stuff like that, you're just sitting there like, I don't have enough numbers for this. And Doom 2099, I worry, might be in the range of like, I don't have enough numbers for this. And so I do think Galacta is a clear cut like purchase. This would be like if this were 6,000 tokens, I'd be like, you should probably pick her up. But she's on the lower end of that than I think she appears right now.
Yeah, Galacta's interesting. We're gonna talk about this later on in the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously she was kind of like meant to be this Galactus thing. That's not really necessarily the case. She just kind of does add a lot of stats. I mean, and you probably play both of these on almost any deck that you have them. She just like Gwenpool vibes,
Yeah.
like crazy, more controlled Gwenpool, right? Because Gwenpool adds 6 power into your hand. She, if you play her on curve, adds 6 power onto the board. So it's kind of a more controlled, less obvious, I guess, Gwenpool, because Gwenpool kind of has some like surprise factor to it, right? Everyone's strong until you get punched in the face with like a +6 power Mysterio on turn 6, right? It's crazy sometimes, but I really really enjoy Galacta, and I do think that she fits into a lot of decks. I feel like there's probably like a really great way to play mid-range is just kind of like a Zabu really good 4-cost deck, because there are just some really really powerful, just pure stats 4-costs now. Even outside of like the Surtur stuff, you're looking at like Malekith, which is just a nasty card on rate for how much you get. Gwenpool, you're looking at Galacta that's adding +3 to all these different cards, and you
AV.
Zabu and you what's that?
Anti-Venom, AV.
Yeah,
Yeah.
anti-venom, man.
There's so
Uh,
many.
so there's just so many really good on rate 4-costs. I haven't necessarily built one yet, but
Wiccan.
I feel like there's probably a nasty deck. We love Wiccan. Yes, you do,
Yeah.
folks. So I think that there's probably some nasty kind of like mid-range decks just kind of like built around that and pure stats. But it is weird. Like mid-range is always in this kind of weird counterbalance of what decks you beat and what decks are gonna take you out. And um, I think that Galacta has some level of fairness because she is a bit telegraphed, right? Because
Yeah.
you kind of know once she's down, when you're looking at trying to defend those other lanes on turns 5 and 6, you just have to know that there could be a huge burst coming out. So there's some level of like knowledge, and you can kind of like understand if you have pretty good deck knowledge about how much power is going to come out of those lanes, and it makes it a little easier to attack the main Galacta lane because you know that they're not going to play there at least first that round. So I think that there's a lot to kind of look at and identify with mid-range decks, but I think mid-range is in a pretty good place. There have been some metas where mid-range just feels awful to play, and you need to be really techy and really call your opponent out. But I think having good, powerful mid-range decks is really good for the game and brings the meta into a more fair feel, I think, for a lot of players.
Bringing us to Luna Snow, who is a card that I can't remember a card ever falling this flat in a while, where it just feels like nobody is playing her. And to that point, I would say that it feels to me like I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I think she's a little underrated. I think she's a little underrated. I'm not saying she's like a card that you're gonna be like, oh man, I really wish I picked up Luna Snow. But of the cards in her cohort where it's just like everyone thinks they suck, they're just ass, unplayable, why'd this even come out? When I look at Luna Snow, I see something there. There's some actual reasonable power there. It's a good body with a good effect that you can use profitably. And it's a card where I feel like, as weird as this sounds, I think it just needs time. And I think it's a weird, odd design, but I see the appeal. I see the bones. I haven't necessarily figured it out. One of the things I was kicking around in my head is like, are you aware of that deck where what we're doing is playing like Mysterio Mockingbird with Hope Summers Kitty Pride, Mysterio Mockingbird Sasquatch? On my channel, we call it The Cook. I feel
Hmm.
like I haven't seen anyone play Luna Snow in there, and I'm pretty sure she's really good in there because not only is she making a card that discounts your Mockingbird, she's giving you the ramp that you need in order to get ahead and stay ahead. And it's just like, there are things like that where it's like, I don't think I've seen people play her in spots where I think she probably actually could make sense. And I'm not saying that that's going to be super relevant right now. We have better mid range shells than that one. But that has been a really relevant deck, and I do think she probably ends up in it at some point. And I guess what I'm saying is like in terms of cards that have just come out and fallen flat on their face, like release Hydra Bob or whatever, she feels like a card where it's like I actually don't think you need to buff this card. Like I don't want you to go ahead and buff this card. If you make this a 3/6, that's probably a huge mistake.
Yeah, I definitely don't think she needs a buff. I think the biggest problem is that like they kind of put it out as like a ramp card, and like classic ramp cards just doesn't really work anymore. I think there's just so many better ways of cheating energy, especially with like Wiccan, that it just feels a little bit unnecessary. I mean, maybe she's even good in Wiccan, which is kind of weird
I've
to just
played
like
her in there.
have
She
even
is.
more.
She's pretty
Yeah,
good.
it's just she's just like a pretty good card. I feel
Yeah.
like it is hard to want to fit her into a deck slot, and it is also really hard to keep track of the fact that your opponent's getting energy too.
Mm-hmm.
That always felt like my problem whenever I was playing it, where like I'd play it and I'd be like, "How the hell they Eliath me on 5?
Yeah.
Cheaters!
Yeah.
Like, what is this?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, I gave them energy. That's
Yep.
right. I
Yep.
I did that. I did. That was me. It was me who did that." Um, but I think that she's good. I agree. I don't think she needs a buff or a change. I think putting her at 2 would be insane, and I
That
don't
would be
think they should
nuts.
definitely
Yeah.
ever
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's weird because there's no real way that you buff. There's not really many levers, right? You can make her a 3/6. I don't think a 3/6 should have such a positive effect.
Yeah.
You can lower her costs. I think at 2, she's insane to get your ramp unlocked that early. I do think it just takes time. She's a card that does a lot of things. She does so many different things. You're right. Like there's Mockingbird synergies. There's just adding things onto the board. There's light clog on your opponent because your opponent has to make the choice of accessing that fourth spot on the board by filling it. So you're kind of like adjusting how your opponent chooses to play. And
Red
I think you're
Guardian to blow that card up.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
Silver Surfer because she costs 3. There's a lot of stuff with her in a way that I feel like if she didn't release the same time as Galacta, we might have
Hmm.
found more of that stuff by now.
Yeah, it'll just take time, and I think that she's a good card. I think she's a fun card to play. She can be frustrating again because she does give your opponent that energy, and a really crafty opponent will be able to use it really well, and sometimes in ways that'll give you bad feels, which probably makes you want to go away from the card. But I think that she will find a spot, and the meta's been really in flux the last few weeks. I don't know if you feel this too. It feels like everything's kind of moving around in kind of like a weird way. So you know, when things fall a little bit flat, and maybe we have kind of a week where there's another not another big release, like I think we're getting in the next couple of weeks. Maybe there will be some time to really see her shine, but I'm excited. I think that for someone who likes to cook different weird decks, she does so many different things, and she's kind of like a Swiss Army knife, which is really interesting to mess around with.
One of the decks that Galacta, in my opinion, revived was Silver Surfer. And I guess I just wanted to talk a little bit about Silver Surfer, why Galacta was so good in it, and what it is that can make a deck come back from the dead. And I think this is like pretty instructive because one of the questions I get a lot is like, do you think X card will bring back old archetype? And a lot of the time the answer is just flat no, because there's a structural reason why old archetype is not succeeding right now. And for Surfer, that structural reason was basically the role it takes in the metagame is it's using it's outputting points with like 2 or 3 tech cards in the 3-drop slot, which means that if you want it to be a relevant threat, either the point output has to be good or the tech cards have to be extremely relevant. So we've seen like some Mobius heavy metas where Surfer was very relevant because it was a very good card that was a very good way to use Mobius and Mobius, Red Guardian. When those cards were like explicitly good, Killmonger, we have seen this deck show up. What Galacta does is solve the other problem, the point output problem. When you can win games with brute force, Galacta into Brood, into Absorbing Man, stuff like that, where it's just like, you are literally playing the Infinite, right? Like, when you go Galacta, Forge the Galacta Lane, Brood, that's the Infinite, and then the Absorbing Man on that Brood is also the Infinite. Like, that stuff is bonkers. And going from a deck that had 0 infinites to 2 infinites, it's like, that's a really meaningful step up. And so when you're looking at, can X card revive old archetype, or what does old archetype need? The answer is almost always either a relevant method of interaction or a shitload of points. And in this case, Galacta provided a shitload of points.
And kind of both, right? Like, because I think that a big thing is not needing to structurally change the deck too much, right? Like, nothing really changed with those decks. It just added Galacta. That most of those decks already wanted Absorbing Man and Brood. So because like these pieces are already in place and they're good, but they're just not good enough, and then you have this kind of just like key piece that you can just plug and play in that fits into exactly what you want to do and just output more points. That's really where I think it shines, is being able to just get ahead and be ahead. And another thing that used to kind of be bad with those decks is that you kind of needed that on curve, right? You needed Brood into Absorb Man on curve, otherwise it wasn't strong enough. And now you can draw those on turn 5 and turn 6 and feel really good about it.
Better, like, you're like holding them. Like you want that.
You have collecting your hold.
Yes.
So it kind of I think it does both. It adds more points and it just like improves the structure and the flow of the deck in a really cool way. And what can this be done with like other decks? Like people, I don't know. I think
I'll give you a specific one. All right. People ask me this one a lot, and I think the answer is just let them run 2 Deadpools. But what could make Destroy great again?
I mean, Destroy's always okay, right?
Yes, like, I mean, what Destroy's could make it
always
good?
What would make it like the deck to play?
Not even the deck to play, but like in the top 5.
In the top 5. I mean, I think no, I do think Destroy is probably a top 5 play deck at all times, just because there's a legion of Destroy lovers. But
correctly in the top 5.
Correct. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I love that. I don't know. I think we saw like some relevant Destroy synergy recently, but the deck has remained almost completely unchanged. I really think that it's almost a bit of a meta shift is needed. Like, even saw like Agony come out and not really make any impact. I almost always forget that card is a real card. I was like kind of started laughing when you brought it up earlier in the pod. I was like, Agony's a card. That is true. The Agony is a card.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't even know what Destroy would really need. Destroy already has like this really locked in structure. I think what it lacks is kind of like 4-drop, 5-drop, kind of like payoff cards, because it seems like everything is like either small destroy stuff where you're just moving things around and destroying, and then you have Nola on 6, right? Or you have Arnim Zola, so you have this big payoff on turn 6. I think it would maybe be looking for something to push itself ahead and really put itself into a dominant position on turn 4 and 5, outside of needing to build up this Deadpool
Yeah.
through. Now, what is that exactly? I'm not
It's
too
Venom
sure,
too.
but
It wants second Venom.
yeah, something like that. Another
Yeah.
big, like chunky,
Yeah.
huge card that you get payoff from by getting like the good cards back in your hand, but you keep the power. Definitely something like that in the 4 or 5-drop slot, I think, can make Destroy be absolutely disgusting, and
Yeah.
people will need to start teching. Or you remember when people were just running armor, like
Yes.
like
just
as a
running
tech
an
card?
armor. Yes.
Crazy, man.
I'm gonna
Like,
armor your
crazy.
Bucky Barnes, dude.
So yeah, I think to get into a position where people are like need to have, because right now no one needs to have a plan to beat
Yeah.
Destroy, because
It just
it's
happens.
fair. It's fair. It's
Yeah.
way too fair. But yeah, it would need something that puts it in this dominant position on turn 4 and 5. Another layer to that, I would say.
Yeah. So Galacta's release, she comes out, she's just like this mid-range stat stick. I have heard plenty of people being disappointed with that, because it's Galacta, the daughter of Galactus, and I don't know, like, I will say I did almost lose to someone who was doing Galacta into Symbiote Spider-Man into Galactus. That is very sick. It's 19, right? Like, that's 19
It's
power
a lot of
Galactus.
points,
Like, hey,
man.
are you gonna be able to beat 19? Like, that is very sick, but it's also just like, you know, if the answer is yes, you're losing 8. Like, if the answer is they can beat that, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
And I guess I will say, in deference to that, I won't say that she's done nothing for Galactus. I won't say she's done nothing. But she herself is like a fairly straightforwardly generic, better thing to do with things that aren't Galactus. Is there some level of disappointment in this being like a flavor fail?
I mean, I think so. I mean, I love playing Galactus. I think that making your opponents kneel is great. It has one of the best graphics in like any card game I've ever played. Like, it's such a satisfying moment, an endorphin hit when you hit the Galactus, that especially like surprise Galactuses, where like they have no clue it's coming, and then they're just like, all right, well, I guess I just lose. That sucks. There's a couple of problems with Galacta and Galactus. The biggest thing is it does make it a little bit shown exactly what's going to happen, right? Like, you see a Galacta, you see a symbiote Spider-Man, all you think is, can I beat 19 here? If yes, then I stay in and win a bunch of points. If no, then I leave. So you're not really getting many cubes out of it against good players. There is a funny idea that you could do that and just not run Galactus in your deck and then
Just full
find
juke
ways to
'em.
win. I
Yeah.
think that there's a world. I mean, I think that interestingly, like Doom with Symbiote Spider-Man is something that people don't do enough. And I was running like a weird hybrid ramp deck that it had Galacta and Symbiote Spider-Man in it, but a lot of times I would just choose not to, knowing my opponent would fight for that Galactus, or knowing that it wouldn't work, and then just winning the other 2 lanes, and then my opponent's having no idea what was going on. The other problem is it doesn't work with goblins. It ruins goblins. You can't play Hobgoblin. Otherwise, you
Yeah.
give it extra power, and it feels terrible. Like, people were yelling at me the whole time I had it in my deck, and it's like, well, yeah, but what if I don't draw Galacta, right? And I think it still might be like the right play to still have a Hobgoblin in your back pocket if you are going all in Galactus. I think the biggest thing is that just all in Galactus it just doesn't work, man. There's people can put up too many points too quickly. And there's too many ways to just kind of like fight against it. But I do think that it's interesting, but I do consider it a bit of a flavor fail. Are there any other flavor fails that you feel like you've seen, like in Marvel Snap, with a card coming out that you thought that it was gonna be able to work with something and it would be flavorful, and then it just kind of was used something else, or maybe wasn't used at all?
I think this one has been rectified, but when Ajax
Mhm.
first came out, and it was like everyone was putting him with every other afflict card, and that was so ass because they were all so ass. And like since then we've, gotten some better afflict cards, we've gotten some buffs to afflict cards, and like now that's
Mhm.
a meaningful package that you can play. But like when he came out and everyone was playing him with like a bunch of dog shit, and then they were like, "Oh, Ajax is bad." It's just like, no. You just don't play him with that stuff. Like
You
everyone's
just
playing
play
Luke
one other
Cage, you
card.
just play him in Hazmat. It's fine. Relax. And then as the meta sort of moved on, those cards got better relative to the meta. Like I know Man Thing had a real moment when everyone was running
Thing's
Wiccan.
crazy.
Yeah, everyone was running Wiccan decks that were like 4 1-drops, 3 2-drops, 4 3-drops, or whatever the fuck, right? And God, I don't think I've ever said that on this channel, but I guess I'm gonna. It's there now. I'm not editing it out. And they were all doing that stuff, and so Man Thing would come out and it would just be like, yeah, every lane you have has like 3 cards that this hits in it, and so it's just playing for 13 power every game. And so like at that point, Man Thing really entered the meta, and it has become a major part of those decks because it turns out decks like playing 2s and 3s.
Yeah. Man Thing's soul crushing, man. What a damn good card. But no, I totally agree with the Ajax thing. I think that you kind of helped push it when it felt a little just kind of whatever, and it was strong at the time, especially at the time. I mean, being able to get like a 20+ power Ajax with a hazmat like was crazy. You just win the lane, right? But yeah, I'm really happy that they did some work on those other affliction cards, getting afflict to a point where I think right now it's in a really good spot where it's strong, but it doesn't feel unfair. And I think that that's what you want to see in most of those archetypes, right?
I've actually like my take on afflict is that it should be a core mechanic of the game. Like, and for that reason, I hate Luke Cage. But like, my take on afflict is like it's Snap's version of board damage. Like that's what it is, right? Like in Hearthstone, you can hit your opponent's stuff. You can't do that in Marvel Snap. That's only afflict. Afflict negative power is hitting stuff. It should be way, way, way more common than it is. And this is also important, it shouldn't be totally invalidated by one card. It shouldn't be totally invalidated by one card. Because there's so much space here. You can use it as a downside on cheating stuff, like Valentina and Anti-Venom. There's using it to hit your opponent's board. Like, I just did a review of the January season cards. Bullseye was in there. Bullseye is a card that afflicts your opponent's board massively. Guess what? Who cares? I played Luke Cage. And it's just like, it feels like it shouldn't be that easy to invalidate something that should be a bigger part of design. And I feel like because Luke Cage exists, it can't be a bigger part of design.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Because I agree. I think Luke Cage is weird. I mean, remember when Luke Cage was a 2/2, man? That was crazy, dude. It just gets running every single. I didn't like that meta at all.
Like we were playing all these decks where it was like we get Luke Cage at 2 and Mobius at 2. And Elsa at 2.
Oh god.
And it's just like, what the hell are we doing?
They were just in every deck, man.
Yeah.
Mobius at 2/3 is my least favorite card that has ever been in the game. I've never freaked out at the devs before, other than being like, just take the card out back and shoot it, please. You have to do something. I can't keep building decks when there's 40 cards in the game I just can't play because everyone's running this card, man.
It's just like they made the card to beat Loki, and every Loki player was like, you know what this card does is wins me the mirror. And it's like, so they're all just playing it. It's just like, all right, cool, great. We mission accomplished.
Yeah, the Luke Cage thing is interesting, right? Because the problem with Afflict being such a core mechanic is that if you want it to be like the focus of your deck, you want to add like 5 or 6 cards that would like utilize Afflict, like this full package. But if you want to defend against it, you could do a small Afflict package, basically play US Agent, Luke Cage, Man Thing, and you completely nullify what they're doing, and you have extra board slots for stuff that does things better. So I totally agree with you. I think that maybe toning down Afflict, removing Luke Cage, and having it be more of a core part of fighting could be a really, really interesting design swap. Now, doing it now, like you'd have to change so many cards and kind of like adjust so many cards. But I do really like that as an idea. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, it just feels like it feels like Marvel Snap suffers for the lack of, for lack of a better word, beating your opponent up, and Afflict could be that. And has been used as that. Arishem is a topic that comes up probably more than it deserves to, frankly, on this channel, where it's just a fairly constant topic of complaint that this deck exists and all of those things of that nature. And I guess I just wanted to give you like KM Best's, step-by-step guide to not being so mad at Arishem. And step 1 is understand what the deck is trying to do. There are a bunch of things that Arishem can do, but the goal is always the same. The goal is always play above curve. Now, what does that actually mean? It means that if you're playing the thing, playing it on turn 3 makes it better than what your opponent is playing on turn 3. If you're playing Adam Warlock, playing it on turn 4, I mean, maybe that's a bad example. Adam Warlock's pretty bad anyway. But, like, what I'm saying here is all these terrible, awful cards that will never see the light of day in a normal deck are much better when they only have to compete with a card that is 1 energy cost lower than them. But fundamentally, that does pigeonhole what Arishem is as a deck. It is a deck that is outputting points. And then at the end of the game, it has some interaction. And that's basically it. It is a deck that does points and plays above curve, and that's the only thing that it actually does. And what that means is understanding how to beat the deck is about role matchups. They are always going to do that. No matter how you slice it, they're always going to do, above curve, above curve, above curve, above curve, blob, Alive. Above curve, above curve, above curve, above curve, blob, Shadow King, Shang-Chi. And it's impossible to predict that stuff, but you can predict their general posture. And what that means is that Arishem has a very pronounced weakness to decks that can just go way over the top, final turn, throw prio, here's 10 million points, all 3 lanes, you can't deal with it. And that is going to remain true no matter what. Whether or not, like, you don't even necessarily have to be like, oh, I'm going to play Darkhawk and Cassandra Nova. That works too. But there are very defined ways of beating the deck. That is one of them. Moon Knight stuff to remove their ability to efficiently spend energy. Like, I can't tell you how ridiculous it is to watch, Black Bolt discard the Shadow King they were going to play. Stuff like that. Like, there's a bunch of really important stuff that you could just get rid of because the deck doesn't actually have card draw. It only has card generation, and that's only if you get the Agent Coulson, and if you don't get that, you're just sitting on some crap. And so that's ultimately why I feel like Arishem is fair. I realize people get sort of locked into the, they randomly generated an M'Baku that came out of their deck and won them Sanctum Sanctorum. And I
should have played around it.
This is my take. I think Marvel Snap is better for that. Like, obviously, it sucks when it happens to you, but it's a really funny and cool and generally entertaining thing to happen. I think that's the stuff that doesn't bother me, and the stuff that does bother me is like, all right, it's turn 5. Are they gonna Alioth me on the correct lane? That's the least fun thing about it, is like, are they gonna Alioth me on 5 or 6? Like, that's the thing that sucks the most about playing that deck, personally, to me.
Yeah, I think that early Arishem had a lot of very valid complaints. The deck was overpowered.
Yes,
there was too many insane interactions with cards that you could have with the old Doc Ock and all these different things that were just
Leech.
It was just unfun. It was just unfun. And I think that all those complaints back then were relevant and they were good. And I think that the devs did an incredible job of bringing Arishem to balance. And I think that no one ever gives them credit for that, because what an insane card to balance Arishem. How the hell do you balance this card? Crazy. There was a couple steps that were in it. Making Casanova be a very powerful card that was free to get was very, very good and very smart of them. I think that they anticipated that Arishem was going to be strong, and having a card like Casanova that's good against Arishem and also just good in every single deck that's ever existed is a really, really smart and good thing to have. And I think they just pulled the lever on the most problematic cards that were in it. I think the Blob was a little bit of an overtune because, like, I don't know, man. I don't even think
he's
Blob
kind of
is good in ours.
ass.
I don't even think he's good in Arishem anymore. So maybe that was a little bit of an overtune, but, like, the Doc Ock Leech stuff was awful. Doc Ock Leech stuff was terrible. And getting those out of the way were really smart. So I think they did a great job adding a little bit more cards. And I think that it is to the point, if you look at the stats, that the deck is just simply a fair and solid deck. And people will always play Arishem because, like me, there are a lot of people who just love playing random cards, man. I am sitting here freaking out, counting down the days to draft mode, if it ever exists, to come out. And I think that Arishem is the closest thing you get to that. Like, there are people who are like, oh, people don't like Arishem for the random cards. They just like it because it's a powerful deck. It's like, you can think that if you want, but there's hundreds of thousands of people who play this game. Everyone has a different opinion than you. Everyone has a different reason that they play the game because of you. I love Arishem. I love playing against Arishem. I think playing against Arishem is a lot of fun because you never know what you're going to get. It's frustrating sometimes, for sure. Sometimes they claw you and win a lane by 1 point in a otherwise unwinnable position, and you freak out, and it sucks, and those hurt. They hurt deep, and it felt good for that person. Just like you said.
Yep.
The enjoyment of this stuff goes both ways. Arishem's here to stay. I don't think that they're going to nerf it anymore. I'm sure that their stats show that there are people who just love to play Arishem, and that Arishem has brought them back into the game. And it's going to be here. So 100% what you said. I think you have to play. The big thing with playing around Arishem is that you play around a vibe, you don't play around cards. And I think that's a really interesting thing that people aren't willing to change. You play around the vibe of what they're going to do instead of playing around specific cards, which you're doing in pretty much every other matchup. And it's hard, and some people aren't going to like that, and that's okay. It's okay to dislike a deck. I think that people can get very complainy with the card, and there's just very, very loud voices complaining about the card. It's gonna be there whether you like it or not. You're playing this card game hopefully to enjoy it and have fun. You can either try and change your mindset about how you play Arishem and how you enjoy playing Arishem and how you play around Arishem, or you can just be mad every time you play Arishem and your card game's worth. It's really on you. If I'm being honest with you.
I think Second Dinner's shown a reasonable amount of responsiveness to community sentiment in some ways. But I think people overestimate how responsive the Balance team is to community sentiment if they don't have the numbers to back it up. Like, a lot of the time, the community is correct about saying, like, hey, this is busted, right? But the arguments with Arishem are not, this is busted. They're more, I hate how this plays. I think that's probably never going to actually get through because they don't care how you personally feel about it. Like, is it a problem? Is different, I think. Like, I will say, whenever I've said this before, people have been like, well, KM, you don't play Conquest, it's a blind spot. Arishem ruins Conquest because you don't actually ever get to see their deck. And you know what? I would be fine with them banning it in Conquest. I think that would probably be fine. I worry that, like, that's sort of I'll be honest though, I worry that's sort of being used as cover. Where it's people who would not be happy if it was just banned in Conquest. Like, they talk about the Conquest stuff, but I do worry sometimes is like, that wouldn't actually stop them from complaining in a meaningful way. And I'd be willing to go out on a limb and be like, yeah, ban it in Conquest. It's not really meant for that mode. Like, Conquest is about learning your opponent's deck. I can understand why you'd feel that way. I generally disagree, but I understand, I don't play Conquest enough, and I'm willing to defer to the people that do and say, maybe you have a better feel for your thing than me, the guy who doesn't play it ever, right? So, yeah, I'd be fine with banning it in Conquest, but I guess my question is, would that actually stop it, the complaining? Or would it just sort of like intensify it, and then people would be like, well, they clearly saw it was fit to be banned in Conquest. They clearly recognize there's a problem here. Why aren't they banning it on Ladder? And it's just like, I also don't know if you want to set the precedent of having multiple ban lists. I don't think it's necessarily a problem. I think plenty of other card games do that, but I don't know if they want to set the precedent. But like, yeah, it's like I worry that it wouldn't actually, because the problem I would like to alleviate is everyone yelling at me all the time when I say I don't hate this card. I don't actually necessarily want to alleviate the balance. I want to alleviate the symptoms. Stop yelling at me.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard, man. Every time I play Arishem, I get trashed about it. There's always just new chatter comes in. Oh wow, Arishem resident sleeper. It's like
no skill, Arishem gamer.
Go somewhere else, bro, man. Like I don't know. I guarantee you that what they show on the stats side of the card is that people love the card and it gets people playing the game. I guarantee that is the case. So no matter how loud people complain about it, people always forget that the large majority of people who play Marvel Snap are not the people you see yelling on Twitter. They're not the people on Reddit. They're not the people in Twitch chats. A large majority of the player base of Marvel Snap doesn't do any of those things. They're completely like separated for the game. It's just a fun little game they play on their phone. And I guarantee you the stats show that people who play Arishem play the game more, enjoy the game more, don't close out of the app more. And that's what a business is going to choose to do. So, there might be valid complaints, and there might be valid complaints about changing Arishem, and that Arishem changes some of like the core concepts of Marvel Snap. But like I said, the card's not going away. I guarantee you there is no chance that the card is going away. Mm-hmm. So like it's kind of just, and I guarantee you they're not going to ban it in Conquest. I can pretty much guarantee those things. So like I don't know, like to your point, like I wouldn't mind too much. I don't play Conquest, so I
Yeah.
guess I don't care really if they ban it
I'd
or
be
not.
like, yeah,
But
if
I'm
that's
just saying
really
it's
where
not
the
going to
problem,
happen.
yeah, if that's where the problem is, I don't care. Speaking of the masses and the fun little card game they play on their phones, I mean, I think it's time we have a serious conversation about Marvel Snap, its competition, and whether or not it's, forever on the downswing, or if this is the kind of situation that can be alleviated by a better economy and all of that. Because I think baseline, the first thing to understand is I think Marvel Snap is genius game design. I think it is so far beyond everything else in the space by a margin that I am surprised by 2 years later. Like, this is, if this came out now, I would be like, wow, that's the future. And it's been 2 years. And I think that is notable and interesting. And I think that the major thing holding Marvel Snap back is that it is impossible to recommend anyone new pick up the game. It is impossible when someone comes into my stream to tell them they can play the deck that I play. And that is a problem that has to be solved at some point, for sure. It just has to be.
Yeah, I mean, I say this a lot. I think Marvel Snap kind of has a suffering from success problem. I agree with you that I think it's the most genius design
They're
multiplayer game of
so
all time.
good.
People get mad at me and people laugh at me when I say this is my favorite online multiplayer game I have ever played. It is the best one that has ever been made, in my opinion. And people think that I'm shilling because I do this for a job or anything like that. The reason that I do this for a job and I went all in on this game is because I am insanely addicted to playing it. The gameplay is phenomenal. It solves so many problems with classic card games where there's not downtime waiting for your opponent to make decisions. Most of the time, sometimes you can get roped, but it's very rare. The games are quick. The games are 3 to 5 minutes, and it's this interesting back and forth between you and your opponent that's happening, and it's this set time length. You don't get these drawn out, odd warrior mirrors like you see in games like Hearthstone or like blue mirrors that you see in Magic.
Or even in
Every game.
Pokemon Pocket, there's like, I will time my opponent out. I will go to turns and we will draw instead of me losing because I'm playing Venusaur Butterfree. Like,
Mhm.
you can do that. And you can't do that at Marvel Snap. That just rocks.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a beautifully designed game, and I want the game to last forever. Obviously, that one is certainly more because my job is dependent on it. But
Yeah.
also, I want there to be a good, interesting player base to talk about this game and play this game forever because I love it. I love it so much. And there's two big problems. You mentioned the economy. I think we can all agree. I think that there was a huge sigh collective sigh across the community when the most recent series drops came out.
Yep.
Because it just feels like what the devs have been saying is that change and improvement is coming, and it feels like they've been saying that now for a whole calendar year.
That's because
And
they have.
That
It
is
doesn't
not
feel
what you
like
want to
that.
see.
That's because they have been saying that for a whole calendar.
And that's just not what you want to see in a game that you love and that you want to see flourish. So I think that was a huge misstep. There's actually three things. Sorry. The second thing is that this is the first time they've ever had competition. For the entire life cycle of Marvel Snap so far, there's never been a mobile card game that has come out and actually put pressure on it. And Pokemon Pocket is that card game. Now, I personally, I think Pokemon card game is one of the most addicting things that has ever been on my phone. I think about it all the time. Right now, I'm looking at my phone and thinking, man, I wonder if I have a pack to open. Because opening the packs, I think that the battling in Pokemon Pocket is incredibly uninteresting. And I think that the events that they do where they force you to play computer matches to get cards is terrible. So I think that there's so many problems with Pokemon Pocket, but it's incredibly strong IP. They made the actual collecting experience stellar, and at least for right now, it is the best free-to-play monetization of any card game that I have ever seen in my entire life. Now, if that keeps going, that the company that does it has some a pretty bad track record of starting like that and then getting really bad.
We'll have to see what happens when expansions start actually getting released. Because when Marvel Snap came out, it had pretty good monetization. You could get every card in the game for free, and then they were like, okay, but now we're releasing new cards. And that is where Nexus events came in. That is where the token shop came in. Like, Marvel Snap wasn't always doggy ass. It just, as soon as they started trying to release new cards, it was like, oh, wow, that's expensive. And it's probably going to look different in Pokemon Pocket, but like if they do like 6 expansions a year and you have to spend like $100 on each expansion, that starts to add up. Like it's not going to add up in the same way that Marvel Snap can add up, given individual cards are costing like a bunch of money. But ultimately, it does have the same kind of issues there, or at least there is a potential for the same kind of issue. We'll have to see how it ends up actually shaking out, right? If it's possible to fully free to play this stuff, maybe it is, but maybe you can't get it in time. Like maybe by the time you finish one set, the next one's coming out, and then you're working your way through that set until the next one comes out, and it's like, well, you have these cards, but I don't know. And I think a lot of that's going to be determined in the future. But I will say that they have made collecting cards fun. Objectively, it's so fun.
I think about it all the time. I was out at the bars last night, and I was with like 2 other people. We're like, crack some packs. We all open up and crack packs together. It was a great little experience. You know, it's just it's a beautiful thing. So I think that the second point is that they finally have competition. So there is another mobile card game with another familiar IP that is very, very snazzy and very well put together that people can go and play. And as you've seen with lots of YouTuber streamers, my fellow current co-host right now, KM Best, can attest. You know, there's going to be a push from the community, and people want to see that gameplay, and people want to do that. And there's a lot of people now splitting time between those two. So having a real competitor, I hope, puts a fire under Second Dinner's ass, because they haven't needed to have a fire. They've been suffering from success. They are the first since Hearthstone. I don't know, Ben Brode must be just a genius at making profitable card games. Since Hearthstone, it's like the only other profitable card game, like digital card game, that has basically come out, except for maybe like Magic the Gathering Arena.
And Master Duel probably count.
Yeah, but those already kind of come like I guess like a new card game, I guess, because those basically already have a player base, and now they just have a way to play it. Whereas Marvel Snap had no player base and created one. So like it's the only one that's come out and that it has been profitable. So it's really hard for them to make any like hard decisions when they like, why would they change when they kind of crack the code on making this profitable? Now they're gonna have a fire under their ass, and I really hope they step up to the occasion. I have a lot of trust in the dev team. I think I have way more trust in the dev team and the balance team then.
Well, those are like 2 different teams, like right? I think a lot of my commenters really try to make the distinction where they're like, we really like the balance team, like we think the game is balanced, we just don't like how much we have to pay for it, right? And I think it's not controversial to think, I mean, like outside of like people who get downvoted on Reddit, it's not controversial to think the balance in this game is good, but it is controversial to think the monetization in this game is good. I don't think anyone does.
Sure. Yeah. And I don't even think that's the dev side. You know, that's kind of like the business side. It might even be on the, it might be, you know, it's probably a multitude of different things. There's a lot of things that go on the back end of, especially these games where there's, you know, multiple different pieces that are all kind of like have to figure out how to actually make their profit and everything like that. But the last point I wanted to make on what Snap needs, it needs something new, man. The last change we've had was Conquest, and you know, High Voltage came out, and people love High Voltage, and they listened to the community and brought it back. I think that's awesome. Deadpool's Diner, I think no matter what the strong amount of like the loud people that you hear, I think that there are people who love Deadpool's Diner and love the betting aspect of it. I personally, I don't really care, but you get a free card out of it. I think that's like pretty good. And High Voltage, I don't know if that's something that could last if it was a permanent mode. I think that people were like, oh, I want a permanent High Voltage. I don't think people really do. I think that would be fun for a few weeks, and then the mode would probably die off.
I think people want a permanent place where they can do their quests with no anxiety.
Sure.
I think that's what people want. When they say they want permanent High Voltage. Proving grounds, though. I guess there's anxiety involved in that. I don't know.
Yeah, I can understand that. Like having a way to just like blow through your quests, I get. But again, the problem with adding something like that, if it just turns into something that dies, is that then like the devs have a weird decision. Do we keep supporting this mode? Do we get rid of it? Do we scrap it? And then people are gonna be mad if you give them something and then you take it away and they get really pissed. Or it just rots there and it splits the player base, you know, as the player base has probably been, you know, on a pretty slow decline for quite a while. When you start segmenting the player base into different modes, it can be hard. But I need draft mode. KM Best, I need draft mode. I want draft mode to come out. They've talked about draft mode plenty of times. I think that in my opinion, the way that they can have a big thing, and this section is called Saving Snap, I think that the way that they can really make a huge impact and get a bunch of new people, or a bunch of people who play the game and want to have a way to come back without having to think about getting all the cards, is a mode like draft mode. where it is probably going to be like you have to pay gold to start it, because usually with getting rewards and stuff in modes like that, there just kind of has to be some level of like early monetization. But being able to access all the different cards and play against all the different cards in a really fun and interesting way, and being able to play the game in a completely different way, I think is what it needs. So if you're listening, devs, get rid of everything and work on draft mode and get draft mode out. People will love it. People will get excited. And I think that is a key way to try and get people back to playing Marvel Snap a lot more.
All right, and on that note, it's time to end. As always, thank you so much to my co-host BYNX. You can find him on Twitch and on YouTube at BYNX Plays. That is
BYNX_plays everywhere. BYNX_plays. Thank you so much, Cam Best. It's always such a pleasure to be here and replace Lambie. I know you needed an
what? No,
expert
wait. I haven't been talking to Lambie this whole time. That's crazy.
I know you needed
guys
another
look so much alike.
Perfect...
It's impossible for me to tell. You guys are identical.
But thank you so much, man. It's always an absolute pleasure to come on here. I know you've had me come on a bunch. Always a great time to catch up with you and chat and talk about my favorite game, Marvel Snap. So I really appreciate you.
Been a pleasure.